Today we are going to be talking about how the portrayal of the human body in art has changed over time, including Giotto's Lamentation, Donatella's David, Rubens' Elevation of the Cross, Rembrandt's Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tulp, David's Oath of the Horatii, Manet's Olympia, and Picasso's Lady Moselle d'Avignon. From Giotto's Lamentation through Picasso's masterwork, we will discover the changing attitudes and portrayals of the human form. Created in 1306, Giotto's Lamentation shows the grief of the people closest to Jesus at his death. Giotto focuses us on Mary unbelievably holding him, showing what would become Renaissance styling, particularly the individuality of the figures. Lamentation seeks to pull the viewer into the grief felt by both the human and angelic figures. Particularly of note are the two figures in front, meant to be us, the viewers, and representing our participation in the scene. Created in the 1340s, Donatello's Renaissance masterpiece, David, cast in bronze, became a patriotic symbol to the people of Florence. David's near nudity showed a return to a more classical Roman style of respect for the nude form. The overt sexuality is at odds with the patriotic symbolism. Florence saw itself as a return to the values of the Roman Empire, and David became a symbol in the ongoing fights between the much larger Milan and Florence, showing another historical underdog. Rubens' 1610 Elevation of the Cross shows a Baroque masterpiece of the Catholic Reformation. With bold diagonal lines and heavily muscled men, we can see the human body displayed at its strongest. We are pulled into the realism of the moment by the movement of the mass of men. Even the cross itself appears heavy. Elevation shows the movement and tension that is the hallmark of Rubens' style. This piece would have been commissioned by the church and intended to act as propaganda, and would have been on display for the masses at Masses. Rembrandt's 1632 Anatomy Lesson of Dr. Tulp shows an entirely different part of the Baroque style. Where Rubens was commissioned by the church and showed religious themes, Rembrandt was paid by the upper and middle class of Holland. Science rather than religion brings us a very intense moment where a doctor is showing the human anatomy to his students. This view of the human form, although consistent with the Baroque style, brings a very different and more realistic view of man. Rembrandt is showing death instead of a possible resurrection and is showing us the human form through science. Oath of the Horatii, created in 1784 by David, depicts three brothers from different sides of the war between the early Roman state and Alba. Regardless of the outcome, these families will lose out as they are all intermarried into each other's families. Oath shows the revolutionary attitudes of the time and appealed to the burgeoning revolutionaries of France. The piece was seen as patriotic. The men are all tall and strongly built, whereas the women appear weak and withdrawn. The piece carefully depicts the motion and anatomy of the human form. Manet's Olympia, created in 1865, shows an upper-class, realistic Parisian prostitute painted in the traditional pose of Venus. Olympia is looking directly at us, forcing us to recognize her sexuality rather than her beauty. Manet shows this realistic painting, typical of the realism style, of Olympia in a nearly flat, two-dimensional plane, confronting viewers with her imperfection and non-perfect proportions. Picasso's Lady Moselle d'Avignon, created in 1907, depicts several prostitutes in various vulgar positions. By not showing realism, Picasso was able to force us to be a part of the scene these women find themselves in. Entrapping the women in a flat and crowded space, Picasso was challenging us to decide for ourselves whether or not these women are strong or weak, whether society itself has abandoned them, or have they abandoned society. The painting is intentionally crowded, and instead of showing beauty, depicts a raw and ugly scene that shattered the conventions of the time, ushering in the new style of Cubism. Manet's Olympia and Picasso's Lady Moselle d'Avignon both depict prostitutes in highly confrontational poses. One of the striking similarities are the depiction of the eyes. Both artists are using eye contact with the viewers to draw us in the scenes. Manet has Olympia staring directly at us, the viewer, with none of the coyness one might expect given the scene. Her dead-eyed stare dares us to question her. Picasso, through three of the women who are staring out at us, confronts us with two-dimensional flattened eyes. His use of non-realistic proportion and the hiding of the faces of some of the women in masks further removes the humanity from them. Where the artist's depiction differs beyond the obvious are the way in which the hands are portrayed. Manet shows a very three-dimensional rendering of Olympia's hands, breaking from the more flattened approach he takes with the rest of her. Picasso shows a particularly two-dimensional depiction of the hands of the women in his painting, choosing to leave the hands in the same plane as the rest of the woman's form. I find both Olympia and Les Demoiselles d'Avignon to be extremely uncomfortable to view and simultaneously impossible to look away from, and for me, this illustrates the true genius of these paintings.